Two cases this summer in Albany alone where people moving into apartments were injured. Earlier this summer, one person died, and on Monday, a couple of people were injured in a fall when a railing gave way, and the cases were ruled accidental. But it did get us to wondering just what your rights are as a renter, specifically if you notice something that needs to be repaired. And joining us now is attorney Daniel D'Agostino from Martin, Harding and Mazzotti. And Dan, thanks very much for being with us. This is an interesting case we have here, or a couple of cases, and it makes me wonder, what are your rights if you sign a lease and you have items in the apartment that you're renting that need to be fixed?
Well, Liz, that's a very good question. When you sign a lease, inside the lease, it should specify who is responsible for repairing what items. And the landlord, if there are items that need to be repaired, the landlord has a reasonable amount of time to repair those items. If the landlord fails to repair those items, there are certain repercussions that you can take as a tenant.
And what about the idea of these people being hurt because something didn't get repaired? Is that the landlord's liability?
Well, you know, that all depends. From a legal standpoint, if the landlord knew or should have known that an item needed to be repaired and failed to repair that item, and as a result someone was injured, a landlord could be held liable for those injuries.
And all right, let's say you do have something that needs fixing. How do you let the landlord know? I mean, the best way to sort of cover yourself legally.
And that's very important. The best way is always put it in writing. From a practical standpoint, I would suggest that you first contact your landlord by phone and then verify that in a letter, and send that letter, if you can, certified mail, return receipt, or have it hand delivered, so that it can be shown that you've requested the item is repaired and are waiting for the landlord to do that.
And what's a reasonable time frame to wait to get it fixed?
Well, the standard for reasonable time frame is how long would it take a landlord in the same locale to fix the item that needed to be repaired.
All right, and I guess then you probably want to know, I mean, it's hard. You move into an apartment, you want everything to be perfect. It's not always the case. What about the landlord? What responsibilities does he or she have to actually make those repairs?
Well, the landlord, depending upon the item to be repaired, the landlord should repair all of those items to the point where it's safe for whether it's the tenant or people coming to visit the tenant. And what I would suggest is that if the item is not repaired within what would be a reasonable amount of time, that the tenant could call someone out to repair the item and then make arrangements with the landlord to have that paid for.
And are there ever cases where it's the tenant's responsibility?
Well, depending upon, again, we always want to go back to that initial lease agreement, and depending upon what it says in that agreement, will usually dictate whose responsibility it is to repair those items.
Okay, well, that's a tremendous amount of information. Thank you for sharing it with us. I'm sure that's going to be very helpful to a lot of renters out there, and it'll also be on our website. And if you have a question for anyone from Martin, Harding and Mazzotti, then you can email them of what are your rights at cbs6albany.com.